The electromagnetic storm hit Remote Station Echo 7 like the fist of an angry god. Cale Torson watched from behind reinforced transperisteel as violet lightning split the obsidian sky of Kepler 442c, each bolt illuminating the barren landscape in stark, alien beauty. The station's hull groaned under the assault of charged particles, and somewhere in the lower levels, emergency klaxons wailed their mechanical distress. He'd been alone here for 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days. Not that anyone was counting. The coffee in his mug had gone cold hours ago, but Cale continued to nurse it as he monitored the storm's intensity from his command console. The automated systems could handle most emergencies, but storms like this, Class 7 electromagnetic disturbances required a human touch. Or at least that's what he told himself to justify his vigilance. Truth was, he had nowhere else to be. The communication array crackled with static, then went dead. Standard procedure during these storms. He was officially cut off from the rest of human civilization until the weather cleared, probably in another 12 hours. The isolation didn't bother him anymore. It had become a comfort, like an old coat worn soft with age. A proximity alarm chimed softly, almost lost beneath the storm's fury. Cale frowned, checking the external sensors. Probably debris kicked up by the wind. This planet was littered with the bones of ancient starships, refugees from some long-forgotten war. But the signal persisted, and as he refined the scanner's focus, his blood turned to ice. Biosignature. Humanoid. Barely registering life signs. What the hell? He muttered, cross-referencing the data. No scheduled arrivals. No distress calls. The nearest shipping lane was 4 light-years away. Whatever was out there shouldn't exist. Cale grabbed his environmental suit from the equipment locker, his hands shaking slightly as he sealed the joints. He hadn't worn the suit in months, hadn't needed to venture outside the station's protective embrace. The recycled air tasted metallic against his tongue as he cycled through the airlock. The storm struck him like a physical blow, even through the suit's shielding. He followed the scanner's guidance, stumbling across the rocky terrain toward a shallow crater, about 200 meters from the station. Lightning painted the landscape in strobing purple and white, and in one brilliant flash he saw her. She lay crumpled against a boulder, her form barely human but undeniably feminine. Her skin held an opalescent quality, shifting between silver and pale blue in the lightning's glare. Dark hair, almost black, whipped around a face that was both alien and heartbreakingly beautiful. 2 arms, 2 legs, delicate hands with 5 fingers each, similar enough to human anatomy to be familiar, different enough to be extraordinary. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular breaths. Cale knelt beside her, his scanner confirming what his eyes already knew. She was dying. Severe malnutrition, multiple lacerations, possible internal injuries. Her clothing, if the tattered, iridescent fabric could be called that, offered no protection against the storm. Protocol demanded he report the discovery immediately, contact the colonial authority, quarantine procedures, full xenobiological analysis. But the communication array was down, and even if it wasn't, she opened her eyes then, and Kyle's world shifted. They were large, luminous, and filled with a depth of suffering that resonated in his chest like a struck bell. Her lips moved, forming words in a language he'd never heard, but somehow understood as a plea for help. 3 years of solitude crumbled in that moment. Without another thought, Cale gathered her into his arms and carried her home through the storm. The medical bay hadn't been used in over 2 years, but Cale's hands moved with practiced efficiency as he activated the diagnostic scanners. The alien woman, he'd started thinking of her as her rather than it, which probably violated a dozen xenobiological protocols, lay unconscious on the examination table, her opalescent skin catching the sterile light like captured starlight. Her vital signs were weak but stable. The scanner revealed fascinating anatomical similarities to humans, a 4-chambered heart, bilateral lung structure, even a recognizable digestive system. But there were differences too, a secondary circulatory network that pulsed with bioluminescent, fluid neural pathways that seemed to extend into crystalline nodes beneath her skin, and a bone density that suggested she'd evolved under heavier gravity than Earth normal. Kale carefully cleaned her wounds with antiseptic, surprised by how warm her skin felt beneath his fingers. Each touch seemed to awaken tiny sparkles of light along her nerve pathways like stars being born in miniature galaxies. He'd never seen anything so beautiful or so alien. She woke on the third day. He was checking her IV drip when her eyes fluttered open, those impossibly deep, silver-flecked eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ancient nebulae. She tried to sit up, panic flashing across her features as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. "Easy," Kale said softly, raising his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "You're safe. I'm not going to hurt you." She spoke, then her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, words flowing in that musical language he'd heard during the storm. When he shook his head apologetically, she fell silent, studying his face with an intensity that made him feel exposed. Over the following days, they developed a rudimentary form of communication. She pointed to herself and said, "Vesa," the syllables, carrying harmonics that made his name sound flat by comparison. When he responded with Kale, she repeated it with careful precision, her accent transforming it into something exotic and beautiful. She was curious about everything, the medical equipment, the food synthesizer, even the simple furniture. Her fingers traced the surfaces with reverence as if she were memorizing the texture of his world. When she accidentally activated his personal terminal and music began playing, an old Earth classical piece, she gasped and pressed both hands to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "Music," Kale said gently, and she nodded, whispering the word back with such longing that his heart ached. By the end of the first week, she was strong enough to walk around the station. She moved with fluid grace, but Kale noticed how she flinched at sudden sounds and how her eyes constantly scanned for exits. She was a creature accustomed to running, to hiding. The breakthrough came when she found his workshop. Kale had been tinkering with a damaged power coupling when she appeared in the doorway, drawn by the familiar hum of technology. She watched him work for several minutes before approaching, her hands gesturing toward the device. "Fix?" she asked, in heavily accented standard, her first word in his language. Kyle nodded, showing her the fractured crystal matrix. "Broken. Need to repair." Vesa examined the component with professional interest, then gently took it from his hands. Her fingers began to glow with that strange bioluminescence, and to Kale's amazement, the crystal began to resonate and heal itself, molecular bonds restructuring under her touch. "How?" he breathed. "Luminary," she said simply, then added with heartbreaking sadness. "Last." The word hit him like a physical blow. Last, the final member of her species, alone in a hostile universe. He understood that kind of isolation, though his was self-imposed rather than thrust upon him by genocide. That night, she told him her story in broken standard mixed with gestures and drawings. The Luminari had been peaceful, their entire civilization, built around harmony with technology and nature. The Empire had hunted them for their abilities, living beings who could interface directly with any form of energy or matter. One by one, her people had been captured, enslaved, or killed. She had escaped the final purge, but barely. For months, she'd been running, hiding, growing weaker without the communal energy her people shared. The storm that brought her to his door had been her last desperate attempt to find sanctuary. "Why didn't you go to the Colonial Authority?" Kyle asked. "They would have protected you." Vesa's expression darkened. "Empire. Everywhere. Trust no one." That night, Kyle lay awake thinking about loneliness, hers forced upon her by extinction, his chosen as protection against further loss. Somewhere in the darkness, he made a decision that would change everything. He would not let her face the universe alone. When morning came, he found her in the observation deck, watching the sunrise paint the alien landscape in shades of gold and amber. She looked so fragile, silhouetted against the vast emptiness of space. And yet there was a strength in her bearing that spoke of survival against impossible odds. "Vesa," he said softly. She turned, and for the first time since her arrival she smiled, a radiant expression that made the bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin pulse with gentle light. "Stay," he said simply. "Stay here, with me." The hope that bloomed in her eyes was worth more than all the solitude he'd cultivated over the years. The weeks that followed transformed Station Echo 7 from a tomb of memories into something resembling a home. Vesa's presence breathed life into spaces that had grown stale with disuse. She filled the corridors with her musical laughter, brought exotic aromas to the galley as she experimented with the food synthesizer, and turned the sterile observation deck into a garden where she cultivated strange, luminescent plants from seeds she'd carried across the galaxy. Kyle found himself emerging from the protective shell he'd built around his heart. He began talking again, really talking. Not just the functional grunts and muttered curses that had comprised his vocabulary for years. He told Vesa about Earth, about the colony where he'd grown up, about the engineering projects that had once filled him with pride. In return, she shared fragments of luminary culture, songs that made the air itself seem to shimmer, stories of worlds where crystal forests sang in harmony with solar winds, and dances that traced the patterns of distant constellations. When she moved, the bioluminescent networks beneath her skin pulsed in rhythm, creating a living light show that left Kale breathless with wonder. Their first kiss happened on a night when the planet's 3 moons aligned, bathing the station in silver light. They'd been working together in his lab, their hands accidentally touching as they reached for the same tool. The contact sent sparks of her natural luminescence dancing up his arm, and when he looked into her eyes, he saw his own longing reflected there. "Kale," she whispered, his name a prayer on her lips. He cupped her face in his hands, marveling at the warmth of her skin, the way tiny stars seemed to dance beneath the surface. When their lips met, it was electric, literally. Her bioluminescence flared, patterns of light racing across her skin like aurora-made flesh. He felt her emotions through that strange connection, her joy and desire mingling with his own until he couldn't tell where he ended and she began. "I've never," she began, pulling back slightly. "Neither have I," he admitted. "Not like this. Not with someone who matters." That night they lay together on the observation deck, her head resting on his chest as they watched the stars wheel overhead. Her fingers traced lazy patterns on his skin, leaving faint trails of light that faded like afterimages. "Tell me about them," she said softly. "Your family." Kyle's chest tightened. He'd never spoken of them to anyone, had buried the memories so deep he sometimes convinced himself they weren't real. But something about the gentle weight of Vesa in his arms, the trust she'd shown him, made the words come easier. "My wife was named Elena," he began, his voice rough with disuse. "She was a botanist, obsessed with finding new ways to make hostile worlds bloom. Our daughter Mira was only 8 when—" He stopped, swallowing hard. Vesa's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. Light pulsed gently between their joined palms. Not his light, but somehow theirs together. "The colony was attacked by raiders," he continued. "I was off-world delivering supplies to another settlement. By the time I got back, there was nothing left but ashes. I should have been there, should have protected them. Would have died with them," Vesa said simply. "Would not help. Would not bring them peace." Her words, spoken in her careful English, carried a weight of understanding that reached the deepest parts of his grief. She'd lost everything too, not just family, but her entire species. Yet here she was, offering comfort instead of drowning in her own sorrow. "How do you do it?" he asked. "How do you keep going when everything you loved is gone?" She was quiet for a long moment, her bioluminescence pulsing in slow, thoughtful rhythms. "Love not gone," she finally said. "Love here." She pressed her hand to his heart, then to her own. "They live in love we carry and choices we make and hope we choose to keep." That night they made love for the first time, their bodies moving together with an intimacy that transcended species. Her skin glowed like starlight beneath his touch, patterns of light dancing across both their bodies as their connection deepened, beyond the physical. Through her unique abilities, he felt what she felt, not just pleasure but the profound joy of no longer being alone in the universe. Afterward, as they lay entwined beneath the alien constellations, Vesa told him the truth about her people's extinction. The Empire hadn't just hunted them for their abilities. They'd been trying to harvest those abilities to create artificial luminari who could be controlled and enslaved. The experiments had been horrific, turning her people's gift for creation into an instrument of destruction. They still hunt, she whispered against his chest. Still search. We'll never stop until last luminari is captured or dead. Kyle held her tighter, feeling her fear through their newfound bond. Then we make sure they never find you. Cannot hide forever, she said. Eventually they will come. Let them come, Kyle said with a conviction that surprised him. 3 months ago he would have done anything to avoid conflict, to maintain his careful isolation, but love had awakened something in him he'd thought long dead, the willingness to fight for what mattered. As if summoned by his words, the long-range scanner chimed softly in the distance. Kale's blood turned to ice as he recognized the signal pattern. 3 ships approaching fast from the outer system. Military configuration. The Empire had found them at last. The ships appeared on the long-range sensors like harbingers of doom. 3 Imperial hunters moving in perfect formation through the outer system. Their sleek, predatory profiles were unmistakable even at this distance, and Kyle felt his stomach drop as he calculated their approach vector. 6 hours, maybe 7 if they maintained their current speed. How many? Vesa asked, her voice steady, despite the fear dancing in her luminescent eyes. 3 vessels. Hunter-killer class. Kale's fingers flew over the console, pulling up tactical, displays he hadn't accessed in years. They're not here for a social visit. Vesa moved to stand behind him, her hand resting on his shoulder. Even through the fabric of his shirt he could feel the anxious pulse of her bioluminescence. I should go. Draw them away from you. Like hell. The vehemence in his voice surprised them both. We face this together, or not at all. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Kyle activated defense systems that had been dormant since the station's construction. Energy shields designed to repel asteroid impacts. Point defense turrets meant for clearing debris. None of it was military grade, but it might buy them time. Vesa worked alongside him, her unique abilities proving invaluable as she interfaced directly with the station systems. Her touch brought dormant circuits to life, optimized power flows, and somehow managed to coax 30% more efficiency from the shield generators. You're incredible, Kyle breathed, watching her hands dance over the control panels, leaving trails of light in their wake. She turned to him then, and in her eyes he saw not just fear but determination. Want to live, want to love, want future with you. The simple declaration hit him harder than any poetry. Here was a being who had lost everything, who faced extinction not just of herself, but of her entire species. And yet she still chose hope. She still chose love. Then we'll make sure you get it, he said, pulling her into his arms. Their kiss was desperate, hungry, tinged with the knowledge that it might be their last. Her skin flared with brilliant patterns of light, her emotions bleeding through their connection. Love and fear and fierce determination all mingled together. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. There's something I need to tell you, Kale said, his voice rough. Before they get here. In case we don't. Tell me after, Vesa interrupted, pressing her fingers to his lips. When safe. When together. When have all time in universe. But time was the one thing they didn't have. The Imperial ships dropped out of hyperspace with a flash of displaced energy that lit up the sensor arrays like miniature suns. They came in fast and aggressive, their formation speaking of military precision and overwhelming firepower. The communication array crackled to life, filled with static and the harsh tones of Imperial standard. Unregistered station, this is. Captain Thorne of the Imperial vessel Retribution. You are harboring a fugitive of the Empire. Surrender the Luminari immediately, and you will not be harmed. Kale looked at Vesa, saw the resignation creeping into her expression. She was preparing to sacrifice herself for him, and he wouldn't, let that happen. "This is Station Echo 7, he replied, his voice carrying across the void. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about." The response was swift and merciless. A warning shot from the lead ship's plasma cannons vaporized a section of the station's outer hull, sending shockwaves through the superstructure. Emergency klaxons wailed as the atmospheric breach was sealed by automatic systems. "Don't try our patience, mechanic." Thorne's voice carried cold amusement. "Our sensors have already confirmed the Luminari's biosignature. You have 5 minutes to comply, or we will take her by force." Vesa was moving toward the airlock before the transmission ended, but Kale caught her arm. "No, we do this together, remember? We'll die for nothing," she protested, but he could see the hope warring with despair in her eyes. "Maybe, or maybe we'll find another way." He activated the station's internal communication system, broadcasting on all frequencies. "Attention, Imperial vessels. Your fugitive is under the protection of colonial authority regulations regarding political asylum. Any aggressive action constitutes an act of war." It was a bluff. The colonial authority had no jurisdiction here, and even if they did, it would take days for any response fleet to arrive. But it might buy them time. Captain Thorne's laughter was like breaking glass. "The colonial authority has no interest in protecting extinct species, mechanic. And even if they did, this system is far beyond their reach. You are alone, outgunned, and running out of time." The second shot wasn't a warning. It struck the station's shield generators directly, sending cascades of energy rippling across the protective barrier. The lights flickered as power systems strained to compensate. 2 minutes, Thorne announced, then we come aboard. That's when Vesa stepped forward, her entire body blazing with bioluminescent fury. "Enough! I will not hide behind innocence. You want me? Come and take me." Her challenge rang across the communication channels, and Kale felt his heart breaking, even as pride swelled in his chest. She was magnificent in her defiance, a creature of light and beauty facing down the monsters that had destroyed her people. But as the Imperial ships began their final approach, weapons charging for a killing blow, Kale realized he had one last card to play. His hand found the emergency beacon hidden beneath the main console, a device he'd installed years ago but never thought he'd use. If they were going to die, at least the galaxy would know what happened here. And maybe, just maybe, someone would care enough to remember that love had made a stand in the darkness between the stars. The emergency beacon's activation sent a burst transmission across the galaxy, not just to the colonial authority, but to every listening post, every free trader, every rebel cell that monitored Imperial frequencies. Kale's message was simple, but powerful. Imperial forces attacking civilian station. Genocide in progress. The last Luminari makes her stand here. Remember us. The response was immediate and unexpected. Within minutes, hyperspace distortions began appearing throughout the system as ships of every description dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Merchant vessels, independent traders, even a small colonial patrol that had been investigating pirate activity in a neighboring system, all converging on the insignificant world where Station Echo 7 made its lonely orbit. Captain Thorne's confident voice crackled with sudden uncertainty. "Unknown vessels withdraw immediately. This is Imperial business." "Like hell it is," came the reply from the colonial patrol leader. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the CNS Defiance. We're responding to a civilian distress call in neutral space. Stand down your weapons and prepare to be boarded for inspection." What followed was a tense standoff that stretched across the void. The Imperial ships were more heavily armed, but they were outnumbered 3-1 by the hastily assembled rescue fleet. More ships continued to arrive. Word was spreading through the galactic communication networks at light speed, and beings across the galaxy were choosing sides. Through it all, Kale and Vesa watched from the observation deck, her hand clasped tightly in his. The bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin pulsed in harmony with his heartbeat. their connection deeper now than mere physical touch. "Why?" she whispered, staring at the growing fleet surrounding their small station. "Why do they come? They do not know me." "Because sometimes," Kale said, his voice thick with emotion, "the galaxy surprises you. Sometimes people choose to do what's right, even when it's dangerous." The deadlock might have lasted for hours, but it was broken by an unexpected arrival. A massive ship materialized at the edge of the system. Not Imperial, not colonial, but something else entirely. Its hull bore the symbols of the Galactic Archaeological Preservation Society, and its transmission carried the authority of ancient law. "This is Dr. Amara Okafor of the research vessel Eternal Wisdom." The voice was crisp, professional, and utterly unintimidated by the Imperial presence. "We are invoking Article 7 of the Sapient Species Protection Act. The being you are pursuing is the sole surviving member of the Luminari people, making her a protected individual under galactic law. Any attempt to harm or capture her constitutes a crime against civilization itself." The legal challenge hit the Imperial forces like a photon torpedo. Article 7 was ancient law, predating the Empire itself, and it carried weight even in Imperial courts. Captain Thorne found himself caught between orders from above and the growing weight of galactic opinion. But the Empire had not conquered half the galaxy by respecting inconvenient laws. "Dr. Okafor," Thorne replied, his voice cold as, "The void. The Luminari are extinct. Your Protection Act applies only to living species." "Then I guess you'll have to prove she's dead," came the unexpected reply from Commander Chen. "And since that would require capturing or killing her first, we have ourselves a legal paradox." "How very interesting." In the end, it wasn't superior firepower or legal arguments that saved them. It was Vesa herself who broke the deadlock, stepping forward to address the assembled fleet with a voice that somehow carried across the communication channels without technological assistance. "I am Vesa," she said, her words somehow reaching every ship simultaneously. "Last daughter of Luminari, my people sang the songs of creation, brought light to dark places, healed what was broken. The Empire feared what they could not control, so they destroyed us." Her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in the quantum foam itself, and throughout the system, every being capable of hearing felt the weight of her loss, her pain, and her desperate hope. "But I am not the end," she continued, her hand finding Kale's as she spoke. "Love endures, hope endures, and sometimes in the darkest places, new light is born." As she spoke, her bioluminescence flared brighter than ever before, patterns of light dancing across her skin that somehow projected into space itself. The effect was visible to every ship in the system, a beautiful, impossible display that proved beyond doubt that the Luminari lived. The Imperial ships began to withdraw, their mission compromised by too many witnesses and too much galactic attention. Captain Thorne's final transmission was terse. "This isn't over, Luminari. The Empire has a long memory." "So do I," Vesa replied, her voice carrying the strength of her entire extinct civilization. "And now the galaxy will remember too." In the weeks that followed, Station Echo 7 became something unprecedented, a sanctuary world under the protection of multiple galactic governments and dozens of independent organizations. Scientists came to study Luminari culture through Vesa's memories. Artists came to learn the songs of creation. Engineers came to understand the harmony between technology and life that her people had mastered. But for all the visitors and attention, the most important change was simpler. Kale was no longer alone, and neither was Vesa. They had found in each other not just love, but purpose. Together, they began the work of preserving and sharing Luminari knowledge, ensuring that the extinction of her people would not mean the death of their wisdom. On quiet evenings, when the station was peaceful and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, they would stand together in the observation deck where they had first kissed. Vesa's bioluminescence would pulse in gentle rhythms, and Kale would marvel at how the universe had conspired to bring them together. "What happens now?" he asked one such evening, watching her light dance across the transparent steel. "Now we live," she said simply, turning in his arms to face him. We love. We remember those who are gone, and we build something new together. Their kiss was soft, unhurried, filled with the promise of all the tomorrows they would share. Around them, the station hummed with life and purpose, no longer a tomb of memories but a beacon of hope in the vast darkness of space. The last luminary had found her home, and in doing so, she had saved not just herself, but the broken man who had chosen love over safety, hope over despair. Together they would write a new chapter in the galaxy's story, one that proved that sometimes, even in the coldest depths of space, love could indeed change everything. The end.